item on the agenda today, and that is going to be an informational hearing of the OITS budget. To get us up to speed on the OITS budget, we have analyst James Fisher here today. Take it away, James.
Good afternoon, committee. As the chairperson said, my name is James Fisher, and I'm the managing IT analyst with KLRD. And today I'm going to present the Office of Information Technology Services budget to you. Also joined with us today are Jeff Scannell, the Department of Administration's Director of Financial Services, and Mark Koval. And I believe the secretary was in the room. Is she in there today?
She's not in this room.
It's possible she may be joining us on WebEx a little bit later during the presentation.
Sounds reasonable.
James, the secretary, this is Samir. The secretary was waiting to be let into the meeting. She just messaged and said that she's waiting to be let in.
It sounds like she might be in the lobby if one of the hosts might be able to let her into the WebEx conference.
No, Kathy.
She just got in.
Oh, there we go. So we will be joined by Secretary of Administration D'Angelo Burns Wallace. She also has the role of Executive Chief Information Technology Officer, and she'll have some remarks after the conclusion of my presentation. The OITS budget can be found in Volume 2 of your budget analysis. It begins on page 1274. Just as a reminder, the primary function of this agency is to provide data and communication services to other state agencies, and they serve 450 offices and 17,000 plus data communication users and 10,000 plus phone users. Similar to the D of A budget, this one also includes on and off budget expenditures. For this agency, on-budget expenditures are primarily for statewide IT infrastructure projects, including substantial upgrades to our state's network. And these are mostly paid for with state general fund dollars. And the off-budget expenditures are primarily for services rendered for other state agencies. We do classify these expenditures as on and off budget because sorry, these are classified as off budget because we want to avoid double counting these expenditures. So on page 1275, you'll find a description of the consolidated service model. In the state of Kansas, we centralize our IT infrastructure and utilize as-a-service offerings by outsourcing some of the services to third-party vendors. This section details the various components of this service model. These include the desktop as a service. This is a contract with Insight Enterprises that began in 2017 to provide computers and laptops on a consumption basis, and it helps to maintain predictable cost of operations and reduces the number of outdated assets, standardizes the equipment, and reduces downtime. We also have the mainframe as a service program. This is a contract with Insono in 2016 to manage the state's mainframe. And this has resulted in improved attention to maintenance of the mainframe, performance, and security, and it also helps project long-term costs. On page 1276, you'll find information on the data center as a service. This is a contract with Unisys that began in 2017 to provide data center hosting and managed cloud services. In 2018, the state began migrating to this environment, and they did encounter some performance impacting issues in 2019 and suspended activities, but this migration had began again in 2020 and is expected to be completed in the near future. There's also the service desk as a service. This is a contract with ServiceNow in 2017, and it helps centralize IT support services for the state. There's the consolidated email, which is essentially Office 365, and then consolidated licensing services as well. With that, I would like to go ahead and jump to page 1285 to start the fiscal year 2021 budget overview. On the 2 pages prior to that, you'll find the a table with a summary of operating expenditures for the agency, one of which is the on budget, one of which is for off budget expenditures. So, in fiscal year 2021, the agency revised request is for $11.7 million in on budget expenditures. $11.6 million of that is in SGF. This is a $1.4 million increase from the approved amount, all from SGF. The increase is primarily due to the agency's supplemental request of $1.7 million for repayment to the Federal Health and Human Services Department for the statewide cost allocation plan, also referred to as SWICAP. And we will review that in more detail shortly. This request is partially offset by the reappropriation of $306,000 of unused SGF for FY 2020 that was intended for the rehabilitation and repair of state networking equipment. And absent the agency supplemental request, it's actually a decrease of $331,000. On page 1285 and 1286, you'll find the governor recommends $13.5 million, including $11.6 million from SGF for the on-budget expenditures. This is an all other funds increase of $1.8 million, entirely attributed to an award of $1.8 million for round 3 coronavirus relief funding. $1.5 million of that is for remote workforce enhancements, and $302,000 of that is for IT security consulting. Also included in the governor's recommendation is the $1.7 million supplemental request for the SWICAP repayment, and a lapse of $306,000 for the reappropriated SGF. This request on page 1286 also includes $45.7 million in off-budget expenditures for the agency's various programs, which also includes 113.2 full-time equivalent employees. And on page 1287, you'll see the governor concurs with the agency's off-budget request, and the total request would be combined of $59.2 million. And with that, I could stand for questions on the fiscal year 2021 component, or I can move on to the supplemental request.
All right, would now be a good time to explain SWICAP, or would you prefer to put that at a different point?
The supplemental request will go into that in a little bit more detail, so I can move on if you'd like, and then we can circle back.
All right, sounds good to me.
So as noted above, the agency has a fiscal year 2021 supplemental request of $1.7 million for the repayment of the statewide cost allocation program. The SWICAP is the methodology used to allocate cost of a service to the federal government. State agencies can pay part of their OITS fees with federal funds, but the federal government does not want to pay the whole cost of that service. It doesn't want that whole cost passed on to them. And they also only want to pay what it actually costs to deliver said service. So occasionally HHS will audit their payments to ensure that the cost that they're paying is as close to the actual cost as possible. And when it is not, they will request a refund of the federal share of the excess billings. In this instance, the federal share was calculated to be $1.7 million, or 23% of the excess balance, which was $7.4 million. For a little more detail on that, in 2017, HHS contacted OITS through the vendor Maximus, indicating that there was a reported excess balance of $5.6 million at the end of fiscal year 2016, and that fund balance grew to $15.2 million by the end of fiscal year 2019. Under OITS's previously reported 15 lines of service on that SWICAP report. Once notified, the state is given about 3 years to take corrective action to correct the overbilling issues. And the secretary noted in her Senate testimony that when she took the position that she found that no action had been taken for that excess balance in 2016. In fiscal year 2019, OITS reevaluated and consolidated the 15 lines of service down to 8 lines of service, and then filed amended reports for fiscal year 2017 and 2018 and submitted a corrected filing for 2019. And this reduced that excess balance from 15.2 million down to 7.4 million, of which 5.6 million, that original balance from fiscal year 2016, could not be amended since it was previously under review. And then if you take the federal share percentage, which in this instance is calculated to be about 23% of the excess balance, you're left with a balance due of 1.7 million. With that, I can, and again, the governor does recommend, does concur with the agency supplemental requests. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Sure, we have a whole lot of choice on that one. All right, questions so far, committee? This is a relatively easy budget, but there are a whole bunch of moving parts to it. So take your time and run through it. I'd like to point out there on the bottom of, or in about the middle of 1277, where OITS donated $10.4 million in new unused hardware to K-State. 1277. The agency paid the remaining $6 million owed in financing on the hardware, but received no reimbursement. This is not a slam on K-State, by the way. That was the Department of Labor's new hardware that was never implemented and was found in the basement of the docking building, still in its boxes. Just so you know. So when we hear, oh, we have a 46-year-old framework, it wasn't built for this, they're telling the truth, but it wasn't because of a lack of action by the legislature. Look for government to solve your problems, you'd better keep looking. All right. Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious on, I saw on page 1277 in July 2018, OITS was separated from Department of Admin. Do you kind of know the history? I mean, I feel bad I was here and I should know the reason why it was done, or maybe you know the answer.
If you'd like to take a stab at it, go ahead. I remember it pretty clearly too.
I actually am not too familiar with the history on that. This is my first time with this budget, so feel free if you'd like to fill us in, sir.
It was just really the type of services that they provided. Both of them provide services to agencies within the government, and so that's why they were initially together. But OITS became far more specialized, obviously, as hardware and the platforms developed and we started all blowing up, that putting it in the same office as building maintenance really wasn't, it wasn't a clean fit by any means. Now, you may notice that we have the same secretary for both. The responsibilities to the agencies are on paper similar, in practice very, very dissimilar. And it also came down to, when trying to figure on budget and off budget items, trying to calculate rent, when you also had to calculate computer usage, things got really messy. And so separating them was probably the cleanest and most transparent way to go about it. All right, well, let's go on to fiscal year 22 because this one was too easy.
You may be disappointed. This one's a little easier too. So fiscal year 2022's requests can be found on page 1289. The request is for $4.5 million in on-budget expenditures, primarily from the State General Fund. There is about $43K or $43,000 in revenue from the GIS Contracting Fee Fund for those services. These funds are primarily are for capital outlay expenditures related to the rehabilitation and repair of state networking equipment. This is a $7.1 million decrease from fiscal year 2021. And that decrease is due to one-time costs for data center migration, network upgrades, and the SWICAP settlement not being present in this fiscal year's request. Additionally, notice absent from this request is that $1.8 million in round 3 CRF. The governor recommends $4.3 million, all from SGF. This is a $250,000 decrease from the agency request, and that decrease is due to the governor partially adopting the agency's proposed reduced resources submission for capital outlay costs, again, associated with that rehabilitation and repair of networking equipment. And we can go into that a little bit more in the section on the reduced resources submission. On page 1289, you'll find additional information on the off-budget expenditures, and the agency's request included $51.1 million in off-budget expenditures for fiscal year 2022. This is a $5.5 million increase above the fiscal year 2021 request. And the increase is primarily attributed to the completion of the migration to the Unisys data center environment and hosting more state servers in that environment. So it's there's just a shift from SGF to the off-budget funds. For that, as state agencies start using that service more. And again, included in the request is 113.2 FTEs, and the governor concurred with the agency's off-budget request. The total request with on and off budget expenditures combined is 55.4 million, which is an increase of 3.8 million. I can go on to the reduced resources component, or I can stand for questions on this piece.
The governor. Okay, wait a minute. The governor recommends 51.1 million in off budget. Is that because of the reduced resources? Am I jumping ahead?
No, the reduced resources is entirely SGF. So this is that shift for SGF that was used for the data center migration is now being, in this fiscal year, is now being moved to the off-budget expenditures for like the fees that the agency would assess for use of that service.
There we go. Okay, that explains it. Excellent. See anything yet? All right, let's go to the reduced resources package.
We covered a lot of it already, but again, the governor requested that agencies with SGF provide a 10% reduction for the fiscal year of 2022. And the agency submitted a reduced resources proposal of $500,000 for capital outlay costs associated with the rehabilitation of networking equipment. And the governor recommended just partially adopting that reduced resources package to the tune of $250,000, which is an increase of $250,000 above the agency's proposal.
Right, excellent. We'll ask the secretary about the impact that might have.
Okay.
Questions for the analyst? 21 or 22? This is your first time to this committee. You're supposed to get grilled a little bit. Representative Wagner.
Okay, maybe a little bit of grilling. What is on page 1289, the conversion of lower skilled positions to higher skilled positions? Is that just agencies can just recategorize somebody and just raise their pay and just boom, it's done? I mean, is that just, you know, standard operating procedure, or is that something unusual?
I'm not sure if that's a recategorization of these positions. The way it was described to me is the agency had a need for higher skilled employees. So we are working in the information technology field. So as people get more certification, as you need to attract talent, or if you have new needs, so you might not need a service desk person, but you might need a project manager, they would result in a higher salary. I think the agency can probably speak a little bit more to that component of their employment changes, or I can get with them after this meeting and try to get an answer back to you on that.
I do kind of have two other questions. I have the 406-410 report, which gives a little more detail. And I'm a little, some of this maybe makes sense. They have under their 52600 account fees, other services from 21 to 22 jumped over $5 million. I take it that's the Unisys, the cost of the Unisys server migration is counted as a fee, other services. Am I correct in that? Because
that would be my understanding, but I think Jeff Scannell might be able to provide some additional context to that on how those account codes might work for OITS in particular.
Let me
the dollar figure is similar.
Throw one else at you, just perhaps you would know. The 5,200 or 52,000 communication account under contractual services drops from like 8.1 million down to 2.38 million from 2020 to 21 and 22. What exactly communication cost? I mean, do you know what that encompassed? Why the big drop?
Could you give me that account code one more time?
It's 52000.
And are you looking at that 406-410 report I sent you?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you looking at the on-off or?
Yeah, just the off budget is what I'm looking at, which I think is what we were talking about is off budget. Okay. So I have that specifically set aside. I mean, if it's too convoluted, but it's a noticeable drop.
I will have to get back to you on that one if that's acceptable.
Sure.
Make a request to see if that's possible to get the information. All
right. Anyway, thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Do we have any on the secrets in the Hollywood Squares up there? Nope. Seeing none. Oh. Representative Burrows asking a question or saying no, he doesn't have one? Go on without me, I think he was saying. All right, very good. Well, thank you for being here. If you can stick around, we might have some follow-up questions, but I think you've described it in pretty darn good detail so far. All right, next up, Secretary Burns Wallace joins us once again, or does she join us? Did I make that up?
I'm here. Can you see me?
There you are. Yes. Well, I can see your screen.
All right. Wonderful. Well, good afternoon. Thank you again for having me and being able to discuss my second agency, the Office of Information Technology Services. I am the Chief Information Technology Officer, and these two roles are two cabinet seats. And so I was asked by the governor to cover both of them just because of partially my background in the broader administration, but also my background covering managing resources in IT over the time, and really helping to get this agency back in a space of focused on customer service, transparency and accountability, and much of what you saw and heard that we have in D of A. So just want to share a few things with you today before taking questions. Again, this last year, our emphasis has really been on finishing that hosted migration that you heard about to the Unisys data center. This is something that was stalled when I took over this agency, originally started in 2018 and sat at about that 20% migration point for well over a year, was completely halted, and that we were able to jumpstart and restart last year. We are kind of at that, what I would say is right around that 92% mark now. We have migrated over 1,300 servers. We've also identified a few hundred servers that we have decommissioned because they are no longer needed. And we have a few hundred left. You know, the reality of moving something this large in a short period of time is that we wanted to make sure we were doing it correctly, and we're almost there and are on schedule to complete in the next month and a half. So we are excited about that. It means a lot of efficiencies and pull through for our agency, speeds as well as support with this migration, and it's been a long time coming. The other thing that we've spent our time on this past year is around transparency and collaboration, being able to truly support our agencies and making sure that we're delivering services. I believe you heard from my team last week around the work that we did on IT rates, for instance. It's a great example of some of the work we've been trying to do so that everything, and understand that we are a service agency, and with the exception of the small amount that was approved last year for an R&R, our entire budget is fee for service. So every time we do any changes or need to enhance or improve our environment, everything goes directly, basically back to the agencies. But we needed to find ways to smooth a little bit better in terms of those rates. And so I believe you heard a little bit about that in some of the work that we've done. But there is a reality around our agencies still having challenges of understanding what they're being charged and how and what that looks like. So we've spent some time there. We have more work to do, but that's been part of our commitment in the work that we've been working towards, but also making sure that we're delivering services as best we can across agencies. One of the examples is that many of our cabinet agencies have an information security officer that are embedded with them to help with security related, cybersecurity and things of that nature. Our non-cabinet agencies are just too small to have an information security officer individually. And so we restructured the way that we were worked and actually dedicated an at-large information security officer that now covers all of the non-cabinet agencies. And that is at no additional charge to those agencies to ensure that as a state, we are hitting those levels in that cybersecurity space that are needed. Those are some of the things that we've worked on over this last year around transparency and collaboration. And then, as you can imagine, just with everything and dealing with the pandemic, I will say we have a phenomenal team of IT professionals across the state who have worked diligently to ensure that our employees were ready to telework, but that also we were delivering services to our citizens throughout this pandemic in unprecedented times and trying to figure out ways to do it in unprecedented ways. Couple of things. You heard a little bit about SWICAP, and I can try to answer any additional questions that you may have there. For us, the important thing there is kind of twofold. This really started in FY16, and as I said, when we came in, we realized that the corrective action hadn't been taken. So not only did we have an excess fund balance that the federal government had already identified for repayment, we were continuing to collect that excess fund balance. Some of this is accounting. Some of it is the way that we calculated our lines of service. This is some of that work that we had to do around our rates and our budgets to get a little bit of clarity. But one of the things that we did across this period of time that is really important for this type of work is we went back and we cleaned up and kind of reevaluated that methodology that were used for those lines of service in terms of how we were reporting it. And we were able to distill those 15 lines down to 8 true lines of service to make them more accurately reflect the services that were being delivered and to map on those funds that were collected. That's where that adjustment came into play. It's not as if it wasn't there. It was how it was accounted for and how it was attributed to the various lines of service. And so the important piece there is that once we figured that out and did that work, we went back and amended our FY17 and 18 filing with the federal government of our SWICAP. And then we corrected and used the new methodology for our FY19. That's how we got that estimated amount of excess down to that 7.3 million from the 15.1. If we would have been charged at that or been held to that 15.1 as an excess, the state could have seen a repayment penalty of in excess of $3.5 million to the federal government. By doing the amendment, doing the corrective action for 17, 18, and 19, and submitting those new filings, we've been able to negotiate and work to get that repayment down to 1.7. The other important piece of this is we are now even, we are level. So there is, now that we've done this, there's no, there won't be an opportunity for there to be an additional repayment request for any of those in between years. So remember, this originally started rated with 16. We've modified or amended 17 and 18 and corrected 19. So we are, as we get ready to file FY20, it is due in March of this year. We come in with a blank slate. And that is an important piece that we've taken the corrective action, we've updated the methodology, and we walk into the new year, the new filing with a blank slate for the state of Kansas. And it is our job to make sure that we are managing those rates across time, hopefully under our new processes, to ensure that we do not end up in that situation again. Other points of interest, again, I mentioned the data center. It has consumed us in the sense that it is our biggest priority of getting this done. As you know and look at our budget, during the time period of when we were migrating, it means that we have both environments that are stood up. So we are migrating to a new hosted environment, but we still have our existing data center that exists in on premises. And so there was that period where we have that duplicate of our data centers, and that's what some of the funding that was requested last year was for. As I said, we're 92% of the way there. we have moved over. What that means, though, is as those entities moved into, all of the agencies begin to move into the data center, they then begin to pay for their utilization. And so that's where you see some of those costs begin to rise. And it's not necessarily because the rates are rising, their utilization is going up. It's matching onto their utilization in the new environment. And we pass through that utilization cost to those agencies. The one thing that I do want to mention, as the chair brought up the equipment that was donated to K-State, I do want to note that that particular piece of equipment was to build an on-site data center for all state agencies. And the strategy, as I understand it, changed in the sense of it was determined not to build a full data center that the state managed. That's something that's really hard to do. And in this day and age, and as the technology has moved, you see more of this as a service that we are now moving to, and we're projected to move to in 18, and are using these hosted partners because it's much more advantageous. The last thing is that our agency, similar to my other agency, did receive CRF funds, and we invested those, of course, in equipment, as you can imagine with every agency, but we also invested it in some additional website securities. We invested in enhancement of our remote work environment, some monitoring as well, and in-user management. You can imagine during this time, we have a larger number of users who are using our VPNs, who are working remotely. And so really ensuring that during this time period that we could shore up those resources to be able to have access to secure lines of communication and getting onto the network, but also that there are ways that if a computer is lost or there is an issue, that we have ways to basically reach out and reach in and wipe those computers or have control over those computers or state mobile devices. So we invested those dollars heavily in and around remote work enhancements and security efforts during this time of increase. With that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that I could about the agency, our work, and the budget.
Well, thank you for being here, and I am just giddy that the migration is coming in the home stretch here. That's been a long time coming. I remember when this thing started out, and it seems like it was about 50 years ago. I'm not positive. But, four. Was it only 4? Well, in the legislature, that's 28. That's dog years, you know. But no, I'm glad to see that finished or coming in the home stretch, and that is a real good. When I was talking about the computer down in the basement there, don't get me wrong, I agree 100% with outsourcing this. There is no way on earth a state agency could stay up to date on technology, on people to operate the technology, and on, more importantly, I think, than any of that, on the security. And outsourcing all of that is just a great idea, and I'm very happy that it's coming in the home stretch on that. Now, I think there were a couple of questions. Paul, did you have a question that had? Oh, Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Burns-Wallace, I just have to say I'm very impressed with your role over the years in OITS and with the Department of Administration, and the fact that you know everything that's going on within your agencies. So thank you for all of your hard work. One question I have with Zoom now being the new thing and people working from home and all of that, have other agencies thought about making their remote options positions permanent? And if so, I guess that kind of goes back to your role in an administration on possibly getting rid of some of the spaces. I mean, and that's the other positive thing. If we're able to make these positions officially remote, then we can start recruiting in Western Kansas and not just in the Topeka area. So just if you could elaborate.
So what I will say is probably a little bit of yes and both and some no, right? It's all over the place. But here's what I think I've seen most. You know, we've talked with agencies and we work with agencies to make sure that they're thinking about their long term. I think with the needs with the pandemics, there were many agencies that were able to go to remote work at a high percentage, but it may not be the most effective and the most efficient for the delivery of their overall services. But it also has given some agencies the opportunity to look at certain roles, I will say, like in IT, where we've been able to source some really good talent. We just brought in an information security officer not too long ago out of Florida, right? And part of that was we had a little bit of a kind of pushing those boundaries out to say, hey, this person is looking at us and we have the ability to have this type of role in a way that they don't have to be on the ground immediately or right away, right? So I think it's given agencies the opportunities to look at their roles and to assess them. But I do want to be careful because I've also heard from agencies that they are making it work, that they are using and leveraging the technologies to be able in this time because of the necessity. But there are also things that we've lost in the process, some efficiencies that we've lost, some ways. And so as much as we may have gained some things, there are also some losses. So we're seeing a little bit of both. My advice to agencies has been to continue, you know, the state has always had or has had for a number of years, a remote work policy. And many agencies have their own adapted remote work policy. And what we have said is this is a great time to dust off those policies and look at what they said and look at what you're evaluating. What is the role? What type of job function does this person have? What is this individual's performance? Does it map onto and does it match, you know, in terms of thinking about them in a remote work way? Now we have a little bit more data on how we function or how we could function and what and how do we leverage that into going forward. So I would say there's still a lot out there, I think, that we're all trying to learn and figure out. The technology can support it, but all of our functions don't completely work the way they should or could in a remote environment. So I think we're all still figuring some of that out. And we're just not there yet, but please know that we are heavily engaged in those conversations and working with agencies to think through things and not to default in either direction, you know, not to automatically say, well, everybody can just go remote. Let's just make that happen. All right. Even in my IT space, if you think about some of the work that we do, my team has been on the ground from the very beginning because we have to be able to sometimes touch, you know, that equipment and those lines. My team was actually in the State House almost the entire month of December after the holidays because we were in the building helping to run and pull the wires to get this system that I'm talking to you on now to make sure it was up for legislative IT as they were trying to bring up the virtual State House. Well, it still sits on the network that we provide on OITS, even though the system is yours in legislative affairs. And so, you know, we were out there pulling cables still and, you know, hooking up switches to boxes. So we still have a mixture, and I think we're still working towards that, but we are a part of those conversations.
I'd envy the job of pulling wire in a building this old.
Yeah.
My gosh. Just out of curiosity, as we migrate, what are the plans for the old data center?
So the Landon data center that we are bringing down, so it is on 2 floors, 7 and 8 of Landon. As soon as that last piece of equipment is out, the Office of Facilities and Property Management will come in. They will completely gut those 2 levels and we will turn it back into functional office space. I think I have 3 different agencies that are vying for that space because of their growth needs and capacities. But we will be turning all of that into office space, which, as you heard yesterday, then we can again collect office rents on. We do collect rent in a data center, just so that you all are aware, and it is a different rate than our regular office space rent. As you can imagine, data centers have certain levels of security, as well as they have certain infrastructure in terms of the cooling and other things that we have to have in them. So the rent rate, quote unquote, in a data center is higher than a standard office rate, to give you an idea. But that changes for us. So right now, there are agencies who are paying rent rate for their space in Landon Data Center. Those costs will go away, but they will now have Unisys hosted costs, right? So they just swap out in many ways. And what the Unisys hosted costs include is that 24/7 support and things of that nature, where when they're in Landon, it's us providing that, and it's a different level. And a lot of times with issues, you bring in a third party anyway to be able to assist if there's a problem or a concern. So, but those two levels, the 7th and 8th floor of Landon, will be remodeled and be ready for, I think, and don't quote me, but I want to say from the moment that we take that space back over, we project within 6 to 8 months to be able to have it occupiable by a state agency.
Representative Wagner.
No, thank you. This has been a really good report. Just one or two questions. Your on-budget expenses, are going to drop down to like the $4.5 million range. It looks kind of like a rounded number. Will it stay then basically in that level because you've done all your other migration stuff? Is that going to be kind of the new range that will be as far as on-budget expenses?
I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, no, I was done.
So go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure if the question was clear to you.
Yep. So you're asking about our on budget, and it's the 4.5. It looks like as we move forward, it'll be 4.5 million, correct?
Yeah. Is that going to continue for future fiscal years?
It is, because last year we were approved for the 4.5 million, which is an R&R budget. Right. So we never had that before. Before, you wouldn't have seen any of that on budget because all of our budget is off budget because it's all fees to agency. Last year, I came before the committee and asked for 4.5 million to give us an R&R fund, very much like you see in buildings, right? The idea that for buildings, we use that R&R for the roof or for windows or for elevators. We needed to be able to do similar infrastructure refreshes for the IT space. And so I made the case in the request last year for a 4.5% SGF support for IT infrastructure. So in this past year, we refreshed all of the telephones throughout the Capitol complex, for instance. People don't realize it, but our telephones are now mini computers, right? And when they are not updated and they are not the latest version, they actually have a risk that someone can come through them onto the network. We also began to replace the switches, and those are the things that our network sits on that moves throughout the Capitol complex. So very much like I have a 5-year Capitol complex R&R plan that my Office of Facilities Management manages every year and presents to joint buildings. We now have right now my team has a 3-year plan for that R&R for our IT infrastructure to talk about what is out of date, out of service that we need to begin to refresh as part of the infrastructure of the network. So yes, it is a rounded number because that's the exact number that was requested and that you all gave to us from SGF. And before that, we did not have any on-budget dollars.
Another question or two. You mentioned how impressed you are with your IT professionals, and I guess I just wondered, again, just kind of thinking Kansas is kind of whatever, I don't want to say an IT backwater, but it's not California or Texas or something. Do you have any trouble recruiting people? I mean, is it really? I mean, it just seems like you're really smoking with some good people, and I don't know, you're able to pay them enough that they don't head off to someplace else.
So, the IT industry is a tricky one. We compete daily with so many different other entities in this sector. And I will be honest, as a public sector entity, we are always just a little bit off of the industry, industry market, right? And so, we pay a little bit less, but we have other benefits that attract people to the state in terms of wanting to be a state employee, our overall benefits. And also, we're not a 24/7 operations per se. And there's a little bit more typically, not during a pandemic, but during most times, a little bit of work-life balance. So we have other things to offer. We also reinvest in our team in terms of really pushing training, trying to provide opportunities. In IT, you continuously need certification ongoing. And so really also trying to invest to make sure that our staff is staying up to speed. We have an amazing group of individuals. Do we have enough? Do we want more? Do we want more talent? We are always looking for new and creative ways. About a year ago, I took one of our positions and I reconfigured it, and I created a director of HR. And that may not sound like very much, but we didn't actually have a HR professional that sat in the IT space. What this individual has been charged to do is not only to do the day-to-day HR for OITS, the main agency, she is actually helping us do some more strategic recruitment and retention efforts across all state IT. Because if we're looking for a developer, many of us are looking for it. If we're trying to get into that market for project managers, multiple agencies might be looking. So we've built new partnerships and training. We've built new partnerships for looking for pipelines, new places to recruit. And with that, again, trying to be strategic about how the state sources IT talent and how we keep it as well. So it is something that is a priority, it is something that continues to be a challenge. We're not alone in this field, but I will say we do have some amazing talent that has joined our team, a number of them who have joined us in the last few years. And I'll be honest, I pride this team on talking about the work that we are accomplishing and the collaboration that we are doing. And when you speak that positive about the environment and the work, it draws new and different candidates. If we are always, in the negative and, Kansas State IT is horrible or it doesn't work, that's not a recruiting tool. So being able to talk in the last year just about the successes that we've had, the work that we're dedicated to, the commitment and the progress that we've made is also part of my recruiting strategy, to be able to say, this is a place you want to come and grow. You want to be a part of what's next for the state of Kansas.
Just one other thing. How do you, how do you benchmark as far as like what you do with the state of Kansas with your, IT services? Are there, I'm thinking of do like KU and K-State, for instance, I'm sure they spend in the tens of millions on, IT every year. Do you have, I don't know, is there some sort of, benchmark that you're working against, or someone you admire that you're trying to, or some state or some, I don't know, how do you know, it looks like you're doing a great job, but just how do you internally know, like, we're doing a great job? Who do you benchmark against?
So I would say as a state, we will benchmark against other states, and we are a part of a number of national organizations. There's a National Association of Chief Information Officers. Me and my team are very active with them. They do all kind of data and research, helping us as states understand and benchmark and understand the industry. But we also, myself and my senior leadership, we're also a part of regional teams. There's a group that meets that's IT leaders from Topeka. There's also one out of Greater Kansas City. So we are in these pockets of conversation because we're benchmarking both at the state peer level, but also with other entities in the region, both public and private, around this. What I will say is, when we talk about benchmarking, you can look at states that would be peers in size and in structure. And in some places, you might see other states, spending more, but that also is an ebb and flow. I will tell you that one of the areas that we're looking at right now and trying to really put more strategy around is that cybersecurity space. We're seeing many of our peer states invest in cybersecurity in a way that's more like a SGF investment versus, say, a fee structure, right? Right now any major security enhancements that we're going to add is going to change our fee rates, right? But we have a very solid foundation for our cybersecurity. But as we look to the future and think about what we want to do, there's a place where I am using very heavily, benchmarks with other states to understand what does their cybersecurity spend look like, and those types of things based on size and structure, as well as what we know we need in our own environment. So I would say we do a little bit of both, and in terms of both our peer states, and we are always sharing in terms of our strategies and the work that we're doing. I'm on a listserv. It's very active. We throw questions out there all the time with other, and it is a closed listserv of CIOs from states. So there's really only 50 of us on that listserv. But then there is, again, we also then use our regional IT peers in these conversations kind of throughout the larger region and even throughout Topeka.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm still not able to transfer calls. I don't think it's the hardware. I think it's the user. I wanted to ask about the reduced resource package here. There was you submitted 500,000. The governor approved 250,000. What sort of impact will that have on you?
The way the R&R works is we're going to be able to put in, as much as we have. There's just like with a building, there's always some type of deferred maintenance or more to have and more to do. For us, the good part is that we've been planning this out, and we know what we can accomplish and what we can shift. And so we were doing our part as a part of that reduction. We know that we can sustain that. And our projects are multi-year. So we'll do a little bit more this year, a little bit less next year, and then a little bit more the year after. Again, because it is the infrastructure piece, it's not as if we will take something away or something won't happen because of that particular reduction. It just means we'll ebb and flow a little bit differently with some of the infrastructure replacements that we have on deck.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. As I said yesterday, deferred maintenance is expensive. So that's why I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to run into a situation along those lines. All right, further questions from the committee? Representative French.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here this afternoon. You continue to amaze me. I don't see how anyone can run two of these organizations like you do. And you just give me a lot of confidence that these two organizations can provide the services for us that we need. I just have one question about the budget. On the 2022 budget, you list a requirement for $46,000 for 2 vehicles. And then on the capital outlay, you have $50,000. I'm just wondering which is a correct figure, and what is the purpose of these vehicles, and how many vehicles do you currently have? Is that too many questions?
Nope, not at
all. Thank you.
I just grabbed my phone because my team is making sure I have updated information. The 46 and the 50, I'll have someone check on that in terms of if one or the other of those dollar amounts, which is the correct dollar amount. To give you a sense of our vehicles, so one of the things to know is that OITS, first and foremost, we are located out at the State Defense Building. And remember that we support agencies all throughout the Capitol complex and actually all around the state in many different ways. And part of what my team does is we actually support them from a hardware, not just a software. We're not just a hands-off group, right? So we are moving everything from servers to actual computers when they come in. When a computer comes in, it doesn't come in and come directly to an individual, right? There are things that we have to do from a security purposes to upload and to move those things. So I have a team that actually is moving hardware at various times and things of that nature, and that are also a response team. So they are moving throughout the region and could respond to things in many different places. Also remember that we are supporting our agencies. So, I talked yesterday about the fact that we have state agencies all over, Topeka, and all throughout Shawnee County. And so, for instance, my printing plant on my D of A hat is out on McVicker. That printing plant has extensive computer equipment. If you think about it, it has some servers out there. We're actually upgrading some of their Wi-Fi currently. So if my OITS team needs to support anything, they have to be able to take the equipment they need, but also be able to get out to places like, you know, the printing plant to be able to do support of that nature. I want to say that we have, and I will verify, but I believe we have 4 vehicles. They are different size and configurations to be able to haul different size and different types of equipment. So does that help answer? But I will verify the 46 versus the 50, and I will get you an exact number on the vehicles, but I believe we currently have 4.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to go along with comments of my 2 colleagues, Representative Arnberger and Representative French, and I'm sure the rest of the committee also, the last 2 days have just really been wow. I've enjoyed as I've been through these budgets and hearing you speak and answer questions about various parts of them. I am more than confident that you have this under control. And I want really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Further questions? Anything from the squares?
Mr. Chairperson?
Yes, Representative Burrows.
This was James Fisher, the analyst.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I might be able to clarify a little bit on Representative French's question. I think I'm maybe lacking some detail in that description on page, I believe it was 1290 is what he's referencing. Just based on the data I have, it looks like the trucks were $50,000, at least in the request. What that $46,000 number is referencing is the overall increase in that particular category of expenditure. So in that line, they had some shift for other items. So like they have additional furniture equipment purchases for $1,000, additional microcomputer equipment purchases for $15,000, but then they have a decrease of $20,000 for like telecommunications equipment, and I just don't reflect that in the narrative.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there's a number of moving parts there to come to the 50,000 number.
Well, the 50,000 is trucks. It's the $46,000 as a number of moving parts.
There you go.
The total increase.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that.
And then, sir, if you will, I have my Director of Finance is on with me. That is Jeff Scannell, and I believe you all met him. Jeff is there. He can address one of the accounting coding questions that came up earlier. If you don't mind me deferring to him for just a second.
Not at all. Welcome to committee, Jeff. She put you in the hot seat.
Well, yeah, she does that every once in a while. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Representative Wagner asked a few questions about the 406, 410, and I'm happy to explain some of the differences between the way we use those accounts. So I think first you asked about the 520 accounts that are communications. So a lot of what happened is we did an accounting change on how we direct bill items to agencies. So when an agency buys an item, we pay for it and then we bill back to the agency. In previous years, we were putting that in the separate accounts that we would have put it in if it was operational for OITS. In the budget this year, we've changed our process so that that all goes in the 539 accounts. So Representative Wagner, if you're looking at that, you'll see that the 539s went up to $5.2 million. That came out of the contractual services. And the difference between the 524s, the 526s, the 527s, in an IT environment, the distinction between those accounts in our accounting system is very minute. So we tend to sometimes be inconsistent in how we apply purchases. We've tried to become more consistent with that. And I would direct your attention to the total of contractual services added to the the commodity line, and you'll see that that is about $40 million. And the total in FY21 and in the revised or request is about $41 million. That difference is the 1.7 million for the SWICAP repayment that we have. So net, really the only difference in those two sections, net, is a 1.7 million increase for the SWICAP repayment.
Thank you. You actually explained it, and I can understand what your explanation. So, good job.
Very good. Any further questions? Drill down deep. This is the budget guy. Seeing none. Jeff, I think you satisfied all of the questions.
No, I think the secretary did that.
Well, you satisfied the last of the questions. All right. Committee, anything else? Now's the time. All right, very good. Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. Thank you, Analyst Fisher, for walking us through this thing. I think we have wrapped it up for the day. We will not be meeting tomorrow, committee. We've had a few weeks of 6 o'clock meetings, and I think it's time to stop that. We will have no meeting on Monday for anyone who's traveling out west for Monday. Tuesday, however, we'll be doing the working the budgets for the Department of Administration, OITS, and the Office of the Governor. So do your homework and have a wonderful weekend.